I just want to begin by thanking everybody who's on this episode of the MirYam Institute webinar. We deeply appreciate your time and your attention to a subject that, as ever, warrants that time and that attention. We're here to talk about the disengagement from the Gaza Strip, and I will introduce our speaker in just a moment. But as ever, I would like to express my profound thanks to Rosita Panini, co-founder of the MirYam Institute. Rosita, thank you for all that you do. And also to our colleague in common, Alan Langer. Alan, thank you so very much for all that you do as well. And whether you are here on the live cast or the postcast or the podcast or watching this on JBS, we welcome you one and all. And if you do have a question during the course of this conversation, please feel free to message it to us via the live chat facility on your Zoom interface, or raise your hand and we'll try and mute you and have you perhaps ask your question live if you wish. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker. His name is Major General Gershon Hacohen, and he is a retired officer of the Israel Defense Forces. And before concluding his career as the commander,
reservist.
Today a reservist. Thank you, Gershon.
Yes, still in active reservist duty. It is very important to emphasize.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Prior to concluding his full-time career as the commander of the Northern Corps of the IDF, Major General Hacohen held various positions, including commander of the IDF colleges, head of training and doctrine division in the General Staff, reserve division commander of the Northern Command, and commander of the 7th Brigade of the IDF Armor Division. In 2005, General Hacohen oversaw the disengagement by the State of Israel from the Gaza Strip, and it's about that we'll be focusing the bulk of this conversation today. Major General Hacohen holds an MA in philosophy and comparative literature. I often say that he is a philosopher warrior, and he earned those degrees from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And General Hacohen is also a member of the New State Solution working group, which you can learn more about on our website. Now, before we begin this in earnest, Gershon, I've prepared a number of questions, some of which I'm going to refer to, some of which I will not. I'd actually just like to have a conversation with you, if that's okay, for about 60 minutes, as we did last time, because I know that you bring in sources and references from all over the spectrum of history and current affairs, and even sometimes prospectively. I'd like to begin by just asking you one basic question, which is, there's a new government in the State of Israel. It's led by Naftali Bennett, who headed the Yamina party. He is somebody who is largely viewed by his initial constituency as having perhaps compromised on some of his principles. Others applaud him for forming the government. But one of the principles that brought him to prominence, Gershon, was an absolute rejection of the idea of conceding any land for the purpose of establishing a Palestinian state. Is that a principle that you think that Prime Minister Naftali Bennett will keep to throughout his term as Prime Minister?
Actually, I'm in anxiety because in that position, what is really important is not your pure ideology, but your practice and the consideration of all constraints. And all the constraints are leading him today to absolutely another route. Just take, for example, what happened last day when a declaration of defense minister gave permission to 1,000 apartments of Palestinians in Zone C. And in addition, he presented the permission for 2,000 apartments for Jews, but actually we have no more than 700. And if we are just speaking about that, to focus that issue briefly in short looking, we must say that it is okay to build to the Palestinians. But what is necessary is what was in the mind of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin when he himself designed the whole Zone C with a personal resolution about every hill. And the whole concept of Zone C, just pointing to those territories that are necessary territories for the security of Israel. For example, the main road between the seashore and the Jordan Valley, what is called road number 5, from Rosh Hashanah to Ariel, to the Jordan Valley, if it will not be absolutely a corridor in Israeli maintenance and with Jews settlements, if a lot of Palestinians build surrounding this road, we cannot drive this road, we cannot protect it, and we cannot protect the whole territory. So what is really demanded before doing something like that is to create a map with strategic plan about the necessary corridors, hills, and the mountains, settlements that we need for Israel, and then we can give the Palestinian what they need, but not before. What he did is to let the forces, the chaotic forces in the field, to run fastly with the promotion of a European Union, that paying and supporting the whole penetration of Palestinians to territories of Zone C. Therefore, I'm in anxiety. Just to pay attention to a very, very important anecdote regarding that, the appointment of retired Brigadier General Mike Herzog to be the Israeli ambassador to Washington. Along the last decades, the ambassador in Washington was directed immediately and personally by Prime Minister. And we are all knowing that the standpoint of Mike Herzog is for two-state solution, very close to 67 borders. And you cannot bring an ambassador that will represent Naftali Bennett ideas if he himself thinking differently. It is not working in such seniority. So either or, either we can really find in this appointment something that can be a source for anxiety, or because maybe he really finding Mike Herzog fitting to his interests, or the other side, maybe he was enforced by American administration, by Benny Gantz, defense minister, and by Foreign Minister Lapid to do that. It means that he cannot even insist about the very, very important job in Washington to serve him.
Well, that's a very, very interesting point. I know, Gershon, just to counter that for a moment, that one can have a diplomatic position where one espouses the views of the entity you're representing while holding different views personally. That certainly can happen. But I do take your point that Mike Herzog, as somebody who you're saying is a proponent of the two-state solution, may be appointed at the urging of Foreign Minister Lapid and Defense Minister Gantz, rather than at the urging of Naftali Bennett. Is that correct?
I'll just give you a story without telling who was there exactly, but the idea is very clear. I was invited to the American Ambassador House for an evening welcoming for a very important ambassador, American ambassador, not in Israel, that he got a very, very important job in Washington. And in that cocktail, a very senior person working for Israeli foreign minister told him in my ears, he told him like that, listen, you must make pressure against Netanyahu because under a very massive pressure, he will collapse. So go ahead with the pressure. And I told him, you are speaking like someone working for the State Department in the United States, not someone working for Israeli foreign minister. What is loyalty?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I do understand the point you're making, and I appreciate you giving us that context on the incoming ambassador to the United States. Gershon, let's talk now about the disengagement from the Gaza Strip. And before I ask you to get into the details of that, I'd like to ask you to tell us about very briefly, your religious and strategic perspectives as those pertain to the Jewish presence in Israel. And the reason I'm asking you to do so, Gershon, in short form, is because I think that's very important for our audience to understand the principles that underpin your positions, those that you'll espouse during this conversation anyway. Tell us about your religious and strategic
First of all, I'll tell you, as you can recognize with my birth, I'm in Evel. My father died 10 days ago. And he was a pioneer. He was a pioneer that established kibbutz very close to the border in Gaza in 1950. He was a pioneer that established other settlements in the Negev. And he was from the first leaders established Gush Emunim that worked to build the whole settlements in Judea and Samaria. He was a leader in all that movement. And I'll begin with what I said in the funeral. I had nothing more than 2 minutes to speak because it was Friday before Saturday. He died on Friday, and according to Jerusalem order, we must bring him to funeral to bury him before Saturday, in the very day. So I had 2 minutes, and in that 2 minutes, I choose to tell the audience about the most important moment in my life that I got advice from my father. And it was a clear-cut advice. In January 2005, Chief of Staff Bugi Yalon came to visit me in the Golan Heights. I was a division commander in the Golan Heights. I took him to Hermon Mountain, and then in the command car, he told me, I decided to send you and your division to uproot the Jews from Gaza Strip. Will you refuse? I told him, no, I will accept it, but I'll speak with my father. When I came back to my headquarters, I phoned my father. He was always straight and sharp. And when I told him what happened and what I need, he told me like that. Oh, Abroch, but you must do it. You don't have any choice but to do it. And it was very, very necessary that he said that. And he was absolutely aware in that short moment about the whole considerations, very complicated consideration. In the days that we seated in the memory of my father, Shiva, came Major General Matan Vilnai. He's leading those commanders that struggling for another withdrawal. And when
Matan Vilnai is the head of Commanders for Israel's Security, and they advocate for a two-state solution.
Exactly. And when he saw all my brothers, I have 7 brothers and sisters, and my father had more than 56 grandchildren, and he saw all of them. Then he told me, now I'm beginning to realize what really you did in 2005. But in order to understand what really I had in my mind, and the story that I'm telling you now is not something that was recollected again and again in order to shape it and to tell it better. I was absolutely aware at that moment about the whole historic moment in which I'm standing and the meaning of the whole trouble I'm going to face. And when I came to Northern Command, to the Southern Commander, Dan Ariel, Major General Dan Ariel, I brought with me a presentation about the way I'm conceiving the whole project. For him, It was just a gun of transportation of containers and people. I told him, you are taking that mission in a very technical way. It is not at all a technical way. It is not just a procedure of transportation. It's not just logistic mission. Of course, we have a lot to do regarding logistical aspects, but my first slide was, we are going to do that in Zionistic manner, in Jewish manner. And what it means, all Zionism along all the years, more than 100 years, was to plant, to bloom the desert, to build houses, to settle Jews, not to uproot them and to destroy them. And when I read an article of Avraham Burg, that was once chairman of the Israeli parliament, Knesset, in his article in Haaretz, it was written, this is our opportunity to make a turn for the whole Zionistic movement, not anymore the quotation that Zionism equates settlements, not anymore. I realized that moment that what I'm going to do is to overcome these people trying to find in that disaster an opportunity. It means that if the Zionistic river finding an obstacle and they are expecting the river to make a U-turn and to go backward, what I'm trying to do, in the way I'm going to do it, is to bypass the obstacle and to go ahead with the direction of Zionism. And I was absolutely aware that what will really create my success is not by speaking, but by the way I'm doing the whole affairs. And I brought to my commanders, to my brigade commanders, several movies. One of them is Spider-Man in New York, when he's just saving a lady from a burning tower in New York, when she's taken down to the road and she's asking him, who are you? What is your identity? His answer was, my identity defined by what I'm doing. At that moment, I realized that instead of speaking nicely that I'm for the Jews, for the settlers, for the Zionism, what will really create the impact is the way I'm going to do it. What it means, and I worked like a movie director. I was in the awareness of obligation to shape the situation because I was aware that I'm working in staging. For example, if there is a siege on a synagogue, something that really happened, and in the synagogue, inside, hundreds of teenagers praying, and I'm bringing police groups and soldiers to attack the synagogue, to break the doors, to penetrate by force. What I'm doing is exactly what was happened to Jews in Rhineland in the 12th century, when the Crusaders in their way to the land of Israel just penetrated synagogues, killed the Jews in the very middle of praying. So if I'm trying to do something different, I must shape the whole situation differently. What it means, I told my soldiers, part of you, of course, praying in the morning, praying Mincha, praying Arvit. Join them to pray with them. At that moment, it was not anymore a confrontation between the soldiers and police on one side and settlers on the other side. It was a kind of mix of Jews together that found themselves in the very huge disaster that Prime Minister Sharon created and push them together to be together in that very crazy moment. And a lot of stories like that. So I really shaped the situation in a way that I will not be perceived by observation as someone that just repeating a lot of events, bad events, pogroms or something like that, that happened to Jews. It was not just to declare that I'm a brother, actually I had brothers there. It was a way we are doing that. For example, who can give me the intelligence information? The IDF intelligence services declare that it is not just a job, because they are working to bring information from the enemies. And here we are not facing enemies. So they succeeded to convince that they are not in the game. So from where I'll get the information? The policemen could really supply information, but what they are going to do, to find information about criminals. Here we are not facing criminals. We are engaging good Jews, Israeli, excellent citizens, pioneers. So what police can tell me about them? Nothing, because they are not criminals. All the ways they are just working upon the whole information in the mode of interpretation, all that method was not relevant to that occasion. Shabak, for example, there is a division in Shabak, the security, the inner security of the Israelis, that dedicated and was very, very strengthened after the murder of Rabin to work against subversive movements of Jews. But most of the people there were not potential of terroristic. The Shabak is excellent with preventing terrorism. Here we are not going to face terrorists. So who they are? I told all of them that I know to collect the information. I went to synagogues to collect all the papers what rabbis are writing. I told them, here's the information. A networking of social workers that came voluntarily to work there. Among them, my sister-in-law. And she's, until today, was angry against me, but they helped me because I told them, you are coming to help the settlements to prevent them from just gliding to lose control. Do whatever you need for yourself, but I can just take your information to help you to do better your job, because we have a common interest to keep the whole scenario from gliding to a huge, chaotic, bloody game. So at the end, I build myself ad hoc, the whole method of command. The headquarters was just a combination of a lot of ad hoc creative ways to do my job. It means I did that in my Jewish creativity in a unique approach. Therefore, the whole mission, if you'll find just what is written about me in Wikipedia, it is written that I was a commander of all that operation. It is not true. Aviv Kochavi was there, other division commanders were there, but actually, I'm the only one speaking about that after, because I absolutely was aware about what's going on. And I was the only one who designed the whole planning according to what I'm telling you. And I had a partner, the commander of police in the southern territory, Uri Bar-Lev, and he always said to the southern commander, Dan Harel, listen to Gershon. He is the only one with an idea what really we have to do.
So
Okay.
Gershon, thank you very much for that context. It's very important, and I'd just like to wish you and your siblings and your family Chaim Arukim, a long life on the passing of your father. I'm very sorry that we've lost someone such as that. I want to talk to you about a couple of aspects in the time that we have remaining. We have about 45 minutes remaining, incidentally, for this discussion. And I'd like to get into some of the context and then some of your personal involvement, even beyond what you've already shared with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, the disengagement from the Gaza Strip began at 8 a.m. on August the 15th, 2005. That's why we are having this webinar today in proximity to that date as a commemoration of that event. It was at that time that the troops of the Israel Defense Forces and the Israeli National Police entered Gush Katif and other communities in the Gaza Strip. There was a unilateral evacuation of 8,500 Israeli civilians and soldiers, and, as Gershon has alluded to, the demolition of 21 Jewish communities in the Gaza Strip. And the disengagement was ordered by then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Now, Gershon, you're on the record as saying, and you've just said it here as well in this conversation, that the Gaza disengagement was an absolute mistake that allowed Hamas to increase its rocket arsenal. So let me ask you this. Tell us about the context and the circumstances that led up to the disengagement of Israel from the Gaza Strip. What was it that motivated then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, in many ways the father of the movement to build communities in Judea and Samaria and elsewhere, to withdraw from the Strip? What was motivating that decision?
First of all, we don't have a kind of diary or list that have been written by Sharon. If the story was taken by, that story was led by Ben Gurion, we can really follow his considerations, his practical reasoning, his deliberation, everything. Sharon never wrote even one word about that. So all what we can try to tell are just hypotheses, better or wrong hypotheses. But before that, we must speak about the historical background in order to defeat the manipulation of Sharon. When he explained why he is doing that, he tried to convince the Israeli public opinion by telling that it is due to the demographic threat. And why it is a lie? Because the real withdrawal from Gaza was not taken by Sharon 2005. It was taken by Yitzhak Rabin in June 1994 at the beginning of Oslo Accord. First of all, he brought Arafat and all his administration to Gaza. The IDF forces withdrew from all centers of Palestinians. Since June 1994, the occupation in Gaza was over, absolutely. No one soldier remained in all civilian places, Palestinian civilian places in Gaza. What remained in Israeli hands? The settlements, the black of the settlements, and Yitzhak Rabin in his last speech in Knesset in October 1995, when he just brought to vote the second step of Oslo in Judea and Samaria, that was really acted in January 1996 after the murder. He said that what's going on in Gaza is an example of what we need to create in Judea and Samaria. It means that he never thought to destroy Gush Katif. He was proud about the way they had been organized. Actually, in Gush Katif, the Jewish settlements, there was not one Arab. So if the whole explanation is that we must change the whole proportion between Arab Israelis and the Jews in Israel, it is a wrong and a lie explanation, because it didn't really change something. What it changed It changed the location. We just withdrew from a place in which was absolutely in Jewish hands. And what else we lost? The function of those settlements was to be a frontier and to function as a buffer zone. Like in Egypt, and the function of this shock absorber is that those who are sitting inside will not suffer from every change in the road, from every storm. It means that those settlements have been the shock absorber for all Israeli states. What we lost is that buffer zone. It means that now the whole Israeli state is like a field car without shock observers, that every small movement just taking side by side the whole car. It means that, as we already witnessing, it helped Hamas to take the governance of Gaza. It helped them to equip themselves with rockets that could attack Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and more than that, they really became a severe threat to Israel due to that withdrawal. And in a war game that was taking place in April 2005, Boogie Alon was still chief of staff. I participated in that war game, and I told them, according to what I'm listening here, you are obliged to go to Ariel Sharon to inform him that we don't have a response for what will happen after the withdrawal, because we are not going to get legitimation to bomb by artillery a refugee camp of 50,000 Palestinians by artillery. We will not be able to try every week to invade inside Gaza with land forces. So we will find ourselves without any response to that. Yalon told me, you are speaking politically. I told him, I'm the only one here speaking professionally. At that war game participated the following chief of staff, Dan Chalutz. He took me to a corner and he told me the same, I must warn you, you are speaking politically. I told him, I'm absolutely knowing what will happen. I'm going to keep the order because I'm a soldier. And not only because of that, I think that we have to clarify what really brought me to follow the order. But I'm warning you that you are just risking the whole security of Israel. Actually, it happened.
So Gershon, if you, it sounds like there were those around you who sought to silence you when you tried to warn them about what would come following the disengagement. But if Sharon did not carry it out because of a demographic concern, and if he carried it out knowing that there was a security compromise, a security threat that would result from it, what was motivating him? What was his reason for doing so?
I have my hypothesis. There are people trying to tell that it was as the Handel said, he was the mayor of the whole settlements in Gaza, Zvi Handel. He said, as deep the inquiry against Sharon, criminal inquiry, then the deep withdrawal he's going to take. I told them, you are making for yourself an easy life.
Wait a moment, I just want to clarify that statement. You're saying that Sharon was under criminal inquiry, and yes, the more the criminal inquiry built, the more he would resort to a drastic measure with regards to disengagement.
The whole left-wing people like Abramovich in TV created the concept of leatreg. I cannot even translate that. Etrog of Sharon, it means to protect him, like the way we are protecting Etrog.
Sure.
Yes?
Yes.
But I'm rejecting that hypothesis.
So what is your hypothesis?
I have
Why?
another hypothesis. I think that after the success of the operation in Judea and Samaria in spring 2002, Chomat Magen.
Operation Defensive Shield in spring 2002.
And after he succeeded to demolish the terror in Judea and Samaria, but not in Gaza, and then yet he found himself under a very huge threat, a pressure by President Bush to follow the roadmap. And actually, he found himself in what he called the narrow road, brought him to two-state solution. He wanted to make it is a Russian way of thinking. We spoke last time about Russian mode of strategical considerations. He wanted to create a kind of shock to the whole system. Sometimes you can create a shock with an attack, but a withdrawal that will change the whole surrounding environment can also be a shock. What he expected by that shock, that he will withdraw without an agreement, and then either it will bring stability and peace, he will be the hero of peace, or if it will bring disaster, it is a way out from all the pressure to the roadmap. But I myself recognize that he himself, and I have witnesses about that from his son, Omri Sharon, that he already planned to make another withdrawal in Judea and Samaria to the fence. It is very close to the 67 border. So in my idea, the way I explain it to the settlers leaders, I told them that I'm really knowing very well Sharon. In all his battles, he was making first battle in attack, creating exploitation of success with the first shock that he's creating, and running after before the enemy will really realize what's going on to accomplish his mission. That was the way he succeeded in 67 in Ukatef. So I told them, I'm thinking Russian. What it means Russian? Our main battle is not Gush Katif, is not Gaza Strip. This is just what is called in Russian doctrine, first echelon. First echelon in which we are going to get the attack, to contain it, and to prepare the main defensive echelon for the main battle. So I told them what he wants to create delegitimation for the whole settlements, to the whole project of settlements, to the whole ideology of these people, and how he will succeed to get this delegitimation if they will just went away from control in their struggle and kill soldiers. If a soldier will find a death there, they are just lost for decades. Then, with these conditions that he will create, he can run ahead to uproot the most important settlements in Samaria without obstacles, without a real battle and struggle, because these people will just lack legitimation in the Israeli society. Therefore, I told the whole people that I spoke with them, I spoke with all the rabbis, with all the leaders. I told them, listen, in that battle, you cannot win. But it doesn't matter that you are not struggling. You are going to design your struggle not in order to win the battle in succeeding to keep the settlements in Gaza Strip. The whole purpose of this campaign, of this operation, is to create legitimation and to prepare better environment for the main battle in Judea and Samaria.
So what
this
you're
only
saying,
explanation
yeah,
why a plan that was taking in plan for 1 month, I have a Gantt, what I'm taking first day, second day, etc., actually was ended by less than 7 days. So it is
you're
kind of
saying, Gershon, you're saying something incredible here. You're saying, number one, the theory that Sharon brought about the disengagement because of corruption charges that may have been forthcoming, that's total nonsense.
It
And
is
you're
not
also
nonsense. It was maybe a trigger, but not the whole concept.
not the full picture at the very least. And you're also saying that Sharon, by deploying the Israel Defense Forces to the Gaza Strip, was in a way hopeful that one or more members of the Israel Defense Forces would be killed, injured by the individuals who lived in the Gaza Strip, the Jewish community members in Gush Katif, among others, and that if they were to kill an IDF soldier, that would delegitimize the entire movement, including those who lived in communities in Judea and Samaria. And Sharon could then, with that delegitimization accomplished, could then disengage en masse from Judea and Samaria. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and actually, I was within a trap. Either, oh, what I'm going to not good. And the Ephraim Halevi that was before the head of Mossad and the chief of Israeli National Security Council, told me, just by taking responsibility to me, that I must take a very good lawyer to defend me, because if it will go beyond control and a lot of settlers will find death there, I will be the one who will be accused for that.
And so your job, Gershon, at this stage, with this understanding that you had, was to ensure that not a single death occurred.
Exactly, and
so
God
that
me,
so
it
but,
was
but
a
you
miracle.
weren't
Just
watching,
imagine.
but you weren't watching the Gaza Strip. You were taking the long view, and you were seeking to ensure no delegitimization of communities in Judea and Samaria.
Because I don't like the Vietnamese, that the Americans in Vietnam won all the battles, but actually lost the war. I didn't want the settlers to win the battle and lose the war.
I understand that. Now, let me ask you another question, Gershon, if I may, because this is something that I've heard over the years, and I've even spoken to you at your dinner table about. And your previous answer is problematic for this reason. There are many who say that Ariel Sharon specifically designated you because he knew, with your religious background, with your Talmudic understanding, you could bring this about in a peaceful manner. Is that true, or is that not true in your opinion?
This is a way that the power of story is greater than reality. As a story, it is great.
Tell us the reality.
The reality is very simple. This is a coincidence absolutely guided by God. And I was really aware about that, and I was going to that mission with a very, very deep trust that it is something that I was dedicated to that by God, really. Actually, what happened? The IDF has no more than 2 ordinary divisions. All the others are reservists. When the IDF, finding a necessity to lead an operation, not just a battalion, he called the headquarters of division. These 2 ordinary divisions that are in daily life with all with full daily activity. The 2 divisions are my division 1, it means 36th division that located in the Golan Heights, and the other is 162, commanded by Tal Russo, belonged to the Central Command. So it was very naturally to take this division that under central command to let them to be responsible to uproot the Jews in the North Samaria. Actually, at the end, it was made by my forces because I really built a kind of a phalanx, a kind of modern Macedonian phalanx that was really guided by battle drills relevant to that activity. So when I ended, my forces just removed to North Samaria and did the job. But they have been located there, and I was sent with my division to Gaza. And I was really in full understanding that if I'll disobey the order, they will have an opportunity, and it was written by General Shlomo Gazit, that this is an opportunity to purify IDF from all those right-wing people and Mashiachis and all that.
No, wait, I just want to clarify that for our listeners. You're saying that if you had disobeyed this order, the IDF would have sought to remove all right of center, and are you saying religious officers from the senior ranks?
Yes, it was for decades closing all jobs in IDF for people that's in a way suspicious to be belonging to ideas like that.
To be belonging to what they define as messianic ideas.
Yes, and I told that to people to the committee of Nevet Kalim. I came to a meeting with them and they brought camera. They asked me, can you go ahead with that discussion on movie? I told them, okay. And I told them, listen, if I'll not be here and all my commanders like Mordechai Kahana and others will really not participated, next year we will have a war. And who you think will bring you victory in that war? Those who are not really convinced about the main meaning of our struggling in that land. Remember that we are here in order to fight against enemies. And we are not allowed ourselves to just free ourselves from that mission and to give our rivals the opportunity to throw our group out of army. More than that, if we are remembering what happened before 2000 in Lebanon, the public opinion that was against staying in Lebanon, what was called the Irgun Arba Imahot, 4 mothers, why it was not the same in 2001 and 2, and Defensive Shield was so successful? I tell you why. Because there was a very changing moment. Those who joined the main units of IDF, especially in land forces, belonged to those groups who knew absolutely why we are fighting, for what we are fighting. And their mothers knew exactly for what they are risking their children. And when Sharon and Mofaz succeeded to demolish the terror in Judea and Samaria, it was due to the fact that most of the soldiers did not come from parents belonging to left-wing orientation. Of course, it is a generalization. You can find that it is not clear-cut, not black and white. But
Gershon, you're a general. You're supposed to generalize.
Yes. Therefore, they have found themselves aware about the risk. They said always that there is no way to defeat terrorism by force, therefore we must go to negotiation and to give them land. And what happened that we succeeded to defeat terrorism by force? It was due to the acceptance of all these people that we are fighting for the future of Israel. And therefore, they wanted to change that phenomenon, that situation. And it was an opportunity to change it, just to throw away all those who have been responsible to the victory against terrorism in Judea and Samaria. So I was aware that I'm in a kind of trap, that if I'm not doing my job, it is very bad. If I'm doing my job, maybe people will say, okay, we can do it. We can go ahead to Judea and Samaria. Therefore, I said exactly to Ari Shavit in an interview in Haaretz, don't think that you can repeat that success again, because every operation is unique. Tomorrow, a new day. And when Olmert decided to go against Amona, just to repeat the same battle procedure, he failed.
So this is incredible stuff, Gershon, and it sounds actually like it's worthy of a full conversation in itself. I appreciate you clarifying that you were not designated specifically by Sharon, but rather this is what's called
But I think
history.
it was by God. It was a coincidence that happened to be, and for everyone looking about that said, well, it was intended in a way that it was just born in the hands of Sharon in order to do that.
Well, thank you very much for clarifying that. And I've asked you about that in person. You've never given me such a full explanation, but I appreciate you doing so today. Let me move on. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I'd like to get some audience questions if they are. I just want to remind the audience, you can raise your hand or type your question in the Q&A, and I will try to deliver your question or unmute you. But Gershon, brief answers on the following. I know that it's difficult because it's such a massive subject. One of the statements that you've made about the disengagement is that the Israeli idea was that we would get international legitimacy to fight against terror in every way. But since Operation Cast Lead in 2008-2009, we have realized that our dream of international legitimacy is an illusion. Now, my question to you, Gershon,
yes.
my question to you about
with
that quote,
the report of the Goldstone, etc.
Right. Now, I want to ask you a question about that quote, and I just want to declare my hand. I don't believe at all that the removal of Jews from Jewish communities will in any way, shape, or form yield legitimacy in the eyes of the international community whatsoever. And I think it delegitimizes our people in the eyes of our own people abroad and domestically. But with me having said that, let me tell you the other side. There are many people, including pro-Israel advocates like an Alan Dershowitz and retired generals of similar rank to you, including Yair Golan, former deputy chief of staff, who believe that the disengagement from Gaza proved that the formula of disengagement can be successfully applied to Judea and Samaria. Now, you are saying that that's absolutely not the case, and I completely agree with your perspective. But what I want to ask you is, what are those generals like a Yair Golan, who incidentally is an expert here at the MirYam Institute, who we regularly give a platform to, what are those commentators like an Alan Dershowitz missing here that you see, and I believe I see so very clearly? Why do they disagree? Why do they say regularly and often that because we withdrew from Gaza, we absolutely can withdraw from Judea and Samaria if we decide to do so?
It is an excellent question, because if military affairs is a profession, we must explain how in one definite profession we have two opposite standpoints. But my attitude to explain that is...
Can I just ask you a question? I just want to ask you a quick question, Gershon. You just made an interesting statement. You said, if military affairs or military command is a profession, we have to understand why there are two different views. So it just makes me ask you a very quick question. Is military command a profession, or is it a vocation? Is it a calling? Is it a designation? How do you define it?
Fantastic. You are just open the door for my following explanation. Military affairs are profession in the tactical level. Actually, if you take a kind of comparative study to observe infantry Russian platoon, American infantry platoon, Israeli infantry platoon, Syrian, Egyptians, it is absolutely the same. Equipped with different equipment, but the function is the same. The brigade is the same. Like if we are speaking about football, you cannot really speak about Jewish football. If Jews are playing football, the Israelis playing football, it is the same football like the British, the Brazilian, etc. The fact that they are Jews not changing the whole game. That's true to the tactical level. In the operational level, every operation is unique and is absolutely dependent upon the whole holistic global factors, including cultural aspects, religious aspects, geographical aspects, etc. It means that to be a military leader, it is not at all just a profession, it is a unique creation. And therefore, in that moment, we are just coming to explain that what I'm trying to explain again and again, Israelis really not have generals. They have a lot of experts for a very, very small operations. Like, for example, a medical doctor expert of brain surgery. He's so much focusing in his expertise that in a way he lost all his capability to be a general doctor. The same about Israeli general in Mossad, in IDF. To lead an operation, a special forces operation, is something absolutely different from leading a war. And here, what they are lacking imagination. And they are lacking the whole understanding of Islam and those leaders of Islam, like Yahya Sinwar, Hania, like Nasrallah, that are guided by Islam. They are not at all trying to live in peace with the Israeli Jewish people. They are just, if they are accepting a kind of ceasefire, it is what they are calling marhala al-istid'af. It means stage of weakness, that they are accepting upon themselves due to the weakness, due to the awareness of weakness, to stop the whole process of struggle in order to reorganize themselves to better conditions by waiting to better timing. And therefore it means, and by that we can learn it from what happened in Gaza. And thanks God we can learn a lot from Gaza to convince the Israeli people that we cannot allow ourselves that what's going on in Gaza will happen in a distance of 20 kilometers from Tel Aviv. We cannot really defend Israel under such conditions. More than that the mountains of Judea and Samaria are absolutely controlling the whole seashore and all strategic assets. And 60% of Jews are living under the control of Judea and Samaria mountains. It is an absolutely crazy military situation. More than that, I think that even speaking just about Gaza Strip, if we will take the number of soldiers that we had to deploy in order to defend settlements in Gush Katif, today we are deploying more forces. And regarding investment, the crazy, unique wall, 30 meters down with cement in the ground, with a lot of sensors against tunnels and all that, that Israeli government paid for that around 4 billion shekel. So if you're just taking the whole consideration, one operation Kastlid, another operation Mudanan, another operation Sukitan, again,
Operation Pillar of Defense.
Again, and they are just leading to nothing, and they are really creating a strategic balance to be a threat against Israel.
So Gershon, I don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. I want to ask you a couple of very brief questions. Number one, in your comments about the withdrawal, you've said that Hamas could not have made the arsenal of weapons that you've just referred to in your previous answer before the disengagement. And you've said in that vein that Hamas now has a strategic capability that they did not have before the disengagement. Are you of the view that Hamas is a strategic threat to the state of Israel?
Of course. And if we are taking that threat as part of a whole system conducted by Iran with Hezbollah, with militia, Iranian militia troops in Iraq, with the Houthis in Yemen, all of them together, including Israeli Arabs with a lot of weapons, what just happened in May that year, it is a risk that we never faced since 1948.
You know, there are so many commentators in the United States who are thought of as being pro-Israel, who I believe are pro-Israel, and they continually insist that the threats emanating from the Gaza Strip, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, do not add up to a strategic threat to the state of Israel. And I say that they're wrong. They're completely wrong.
Of course they are wrong, because
why do they fail to see that?
Because they
threat?
are not reshaping and making reframing of the whole concept of existential threat. They are thinking about the threat in the paradigm of Berlin 1945. That's true. They cannot invade Israel, come to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and to demolish Israeli government in the way that the Allies do that in Berlin. If this is a paradigm, it means we don't have an existential strategic threat, but they are absolutely creative, these people, and they succeeded to create an absolutely new forms of postmodern existential threats. Just look what's going on today in Afghanistan, in Iraq, how the superpower United States, with military organizations that no state had before, not succeeding to bring a victory.
So let me ask you my last question. Before I do that, I just want to implore everybody here, whether they're watching live or whether you're watching on a postcast or listening to the podcast, to please look at the documentary. You can find it on YouTube, called Withdrawal from Gaza. We have put a link in the chat box. Everybody can look at that. It's a very stirring documentary that everybody should look at. That is called Withdrawal from Gaza, and they can find it on YouTube. It's free and available for everybody who wishes to learn more about this subject. Gershon, we all live with regrets in this world. We all live with issues that lay heavy on our hearts as individuals. Dado Elazar was said to have died of a broken heart because he was lambasted and criticized in the wake of the Yom Kippur War by the Israeli media machine and Israeli politicians, when actually he, in my estimation, actually saved the state of Israel by his actions.
Of course.
I ask you whether you are an individual who suffers now from a broken heart, given that you are often portrayed in the media, as we've discovered during this conversation, as having been manipulated into commanding the disengagement, and as someone who carried out a command that you knew in advance would lead to catastrophe and was against your religious and emotional principles, and indeed, as you've shared with us, against the principles of your dear father of blessed memory. Do you carry with you a broken heart? Do you suffer from that? Or how do you live on with that?
No. I'm, you know, in Hebrew, only in Hebrew, we are asking Ma Shlomcha. If you are making direct translation, it means that I'm asking, what is your peace? Or how is your peace?
How is your peace? Ma Shlomcha, from the word shalom. What is your peace?
Actually, and even in Birkat Kohanim, we are praying, I'm Kohen, at the end, V'yasem lecha shalom. When God blessing someone in that situation of shalom, it means shlemut. It means you can really
Shalom means completion. Shalem is completion.
It means exactly, you can contain a lot of tension, but by bless of God, you can contain them with being compensated with that, with balance. And I was in balance from the beginning of that mission. Because, and even ask rabbis, do you think that wherever in all Holy Scripture, it is written what Gershon Hacohen must do in summer 2005? It is not written. It is a question that I have to deliberate with my way to God and to just try to learn what God's expecting from me from the way he's leading me. And I must just observe reality in the way he's leading me to do that. And actually, one of the explanations how I succeeded, and of course I succeeded, the very miracles that more than 40,000 people engaged with very physical engagement in that very narrow location. And no one of them, not a child, not an old man, not a soldier, got even heart attack. Along that days, not one of them died. It is against nature. Just statistically, someone could find his death. For me, I realized that I really was guided by angels in doing that. Therefore, when I'm trying to explain it, I'm just knowing that I even not in a situation as a lot of settlers trying to enforce me to do, to just apologize, to ask for forgiveness. I told them I don't have to ask for forgiveness from you. I was really dedicated to do my mission as guided by God. Therefore, I'm living quite well with that.
Gershon, I very much appreciate your time. I'm going to take just one audience question. It comes from Yoram. Yoram, I'm going to ask you to ask your question in 15, and that's 15 seconds, please. And Gershon, if you could give a very brief answer to that question,
okay.
And then we'll wrap. Yoram, the microphone is yours, and you can speak.
Well, a two-part question. One is, do you see a bad scenario when we have to take back Gaza by land force? And a good scenario, and that's a statement, the only way we'll have peace in our lifetime is basically with the withdrawal from Gaza, and when the Hamas or whoever is in charge would rather have prosperity and not kill us. And by the way, shalom is not just peace, means also to pay. Begin paid a lot to have peace with Egypt, gave Sinai, etc., etc.
Thank you, Gershon. If you could just answer that question.
Yes, of course.
Very briefly.
We must, at that moment, open a whole book about the difference between American people and Muslims. And I tell you, Professor Hartman, David Hartman, once said, I'm proud to belong to Judeo-Christian orientation. I told him, listen, I can understand you. I'm coming from Judeo-Islamic orientation because the Bible is absolutely much more close to Islam than to Christianity. And the whole idea that prosperity could take out the motivation to fight is an American idea. And I'll tell you that as it was presented by first star general in Pentagon, when I met him with a group from my cadets in National Defense College, in Pentagon, he said, at the end, what everyone wants the same, that kids going to school in security, restaurants are open to midnight. I told them, listen, not only you are not beginning to understand Bin Laden, you are not beginning to understand the whole Israeli people, because if all what we are dreaming is kids going to school in security, etc., why not in Los Angeles, in New York, in New Jersey? Why to struggle for that more than 100 years in our fatherland? To struggle for fatherland is something absolutely else from prosperity. Prosperity is not everything. By that, I'm thinking like an Arab. And the whole idea of Americans that prosperity could change everything is a dream. Look what happened in Afghanistan with nation building, the dream of President Bush. How many billions of dollars they spent it there, and what happened?
Gershon, thank you so very much for your time today. I want to reiterate that everybody should look at the documentary Withdrawal from Gaza, which can be found on YouTube and is free there. It's also, if you received our newsletter about this webinar, there's a link to it if you go back to that newsletter, and we've put a link in this chat. Gershon, I would like to reiterate my thanks, first of all, to co-founder Rosita Panini for everything that she does. Thank you so very much, Rosita. Thank you to Alan Langer, our colleague in common. Thank you to the ladies and gentlemen who are listening to this, whether it's on the livecast, postcast, podcast, or on JBS. But most importantly, Gershon, I would like to reiterate my wishes to you and your dear family for a Chayim Arukim, and may
Thank
be
you very much
bound up and
listening
comforted
to us.
among the mourners of Zion in memory of your dear father. May his memory be a blessing. And I thank you for educating me and for being so candid during the course of this conversation, and I look forward to future discussions with you. Thank you for all you do.
Great.
And Gershon, we at the Institute not only value your intellectual contributions, but we also love you as a great Jew and a great leader of the Jewish people. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.